The ocean doesn't knock. I don't mean the normal stuff, wave slap, cable hum, the slow complaining of steel when it's got a few thousand tons of water leaning on it. I mean knock, knock, knock like knuckles on a door, like somebody outside wants to be let in. That's why I'm finally talking. Because it happened again tonight, and I can't keep pretending it was just a bad shift, a panic spiral, nitrogen ghosts. If I don't pin this down in words, I'm going to end up doing what they want. Going quiet, going soft, letting the water smooth me into something that doesn't resist. So yeah, I wasn't going to post this. I told myself that writing it would make it real, and if I kept it fuzzy, half-remembered, maybe it'd stay a nightmare with rules I could wake up from. But then the knocking started again, and the sonar ping changed, and now there's something parked against the hull that shouldn't exist. Last night started too normal. That's always how it starts. Anyone who's worked offshore knows that feeling. Routine so thick you can chew it, boredom with a job title. I'm a dive safety officer, was, technically, on a saturation support vessel that serviced a deep water platform in a subsea habitat. Think a floating factory bolted to the ocean with pipes like arteries, and underneath it, a metal can on the seafloor where men live for weeks so they can weld, cut, fix, and bleed in the dark without dying from pressure changes. My shift ran late because one of the hot water suits was acting up, and you don't let a guy go down to 300 feet with a heater line that coughs like a smoker. Everything out there is the same boring terror. You check, you log, you check again, because if you miss something small, the ocean doesn't send you an invoice. It just takes the body. By the time I peeled off my headset and stepped out of dive control, it was after 2300. The vessel was in that half-sleep state. Lights dimmed, corridors quiet, the air cold and wet from the AC fighting humidity it can't win against. The smell was always brine and machine oil and old coffee. The deck plates had that permanent tacky feel, like they never fully dried in their whole goddamn lives. I could have taken a long way to my cabin, through the main corridor where the cameras are and the galley glow spills out, and you can bump into someone making a midnight sandwich. But I was exhausted, my eyes felt gritty, and a shortcut was right there. A service passage that ran behind the ROV bay and down past the moon pool access. I knew every turn. I liked routines. Routines make you invisible. The service passage was colder. The lights flickered the way they always did, like a dying animal blinking. Condensation dripped from pipes overhead, steady, rhythmic, annoying, landing on my shoulders and making my coveralls cling. I remember thinking, like I always did, someone needs to fix that insulation. I also remember hearing the sonar ping through the bulkhead. That's another thing people don't get until they live with it. Sonar becomes part of your bloodstream. You stop hearing it consciously, but your body does. Ping, 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 a distant, regular heartbeat. Most nights it's comforting. It means the ship is awake, watching, mapping the water so you don't drift into something you shouldn't. Last night the ping had a hitch. Not louder, not faster, just wrong by a fraction, like someone took a song you know and shifted one note sharp. My teeth ached with it for a second. I stopped in the corridor without meaning to, hand on the railing, frowning like an idiot at nothing. The ping steadied. I told myself I was tired. I kept walking. Halfway down the passage, there's a door with a red sign that says authorized personnel only. Beyond it is a small staging area for the dive bell, just a cramped room with lockers, racks, hoses, spare parts, and the access to the bell launch. I had no business going in there at that hour, but the door wasn't shut. It sat ajar, maybe an inch, enough to leak a sliver of light into the corridor. That bothered me immediately. On a vessel like ours, doors are religion. You dog them shut. You latch everything. Water finds gaps the way guilt finds excuses. I slowed. I should have just reached over, pulled it closed, and kept going. If I'd done that, maybe I'd still be sleeping like a human. Instead, I glanced in. The staging area looked off. Not messy, not ransacked. Off like furniture in a room you've seen 100 times, but someone shifted it 3 inches to the left. A small submersible transport pod was backed into the space. We didn't keep anything like that in there. It was about the size of a van, rounded edges, matte white composite panels, no markings. It sat on a low cradle with its skids still wet, beads of water rolling down its sides. I could smell the cold, clean ocean on it, not the stale ship air. It had no company logo, no registration numbers, nothing. Just white, unmarked, wrong. It was angled slightly wrong too, like it had been left in a hurry. I remember noticing that detail because it pissed me off in the dumbest way. Like, who parts like that? Like I was going to write it up as a safety violation. Then the hatch opened. It didn't clang. It didn't hiss. It slid aside so quietly I didn't register it as sound. Just felt that sudden shift in the air, the way you feel a door open behind you without seeing it. The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop. A man stood in the hatchway, half shadow, one hand braced on the inside edge. He wasn't wearing coveralls. He wasn't in our colors. He had on a dark dry suit with the hood down, collar open, a rebreather unit hanging off one shoulder like he'd just taken it off. His hair was damp. See, damp, not sweat damp. I couldn't see his eyes clearly at first. The light behind him made his face a flat mask, but I knew he was looking directly at me. He smiled, not friendly, not overtly threatening. Familiar, like he'd seen me before and was pleased I finally walked where he wanted. "Hey," he said, voice casual, like he'd bumped into me in a grocery store aisle. "You dropped something?" For one stupid second, my brain did what brains do when they're trying to survive. It accepted the script. I looked down automatically in my boots. There was nothing. When I looked back up, he'd stepped closer. I hadn't heard his feet. That's what hit me first. Not the trespass, not the unmarked pod, but the way he moved like sound was optional. "I didn't drop anything," I said, and my voice came out too loud in the narrow passage. My throat tasted like metal, like I'd bitten my tongue. His smile twitched, like he was amused by my answer. "You sure?" he asked. "Happens all the time. Things fall. You don't notice until it's gone." Behind him, deeper inside the pod, something shifted. That's when I saw the second man. He was sitting inside on a bench seat, low and still, like he'd been waiting in that exact position for hours. He wore the same kind of dark suit, same gear, but his hood was up. His hands rested on his knees, fingers flexing slowly, rhythmically, like he was keeping time with something I couldn't hear. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning. He watched me the way you watch traffic before crossing a road, judging distance, timing. The first man took another step toward me, close enough now that I could smell him. Salt, neoprene, and something faintly rotten under it, like seaweed left in a bucket too long. His suit was speckled with pale flecks, dried mineral residue, like he'd been somewhere with different water. Something inside me snapped into place so cleanly it felt like a latch clicking. No sots, no logic, just one overwhelming certainty. If he touches you, you're not coming back. I backed up fast, shoulders scraping the bulkhead. "Who the fuck are you?" I heard myself say, and it was thin, desperate, not the command voice I used in emergencies. He kept smiling. "Easy," he said, like I was a dog about to bite. "We're just here for what got dropped." "I'm calling security." I lied because my hand was nowhere near my radio, and my phone was in my cabin, and my body was already turning to run. The second man's fingers flexed once, slow, like he was finishing a count. I ran. I didn't scream. Offshore, you don't scream unless someone's dying, because every scream turns into paperwork and questions and men with clipboards. I just ran, boots slapping wet deck plates, breath ripping out of me in ugly short bursts. My lungs felt too small. The corridor narrowed behind me like the ship itself was trying to swallow me. I heard footsteps, heavy, purposeful, not hurried, not panicked, like they knew exactly how much effort it would take to catch me and they didn't want to waste calories. For a split second, I was sure a hand was going to clamp on my collar and haul me back. I imagined the cold rubber grip, the sudden yank, the way your balance goes and you're at someone else's mercy. I cut hard into a side passage that led up toward the main corridor. My boots nearly went out from under me on a patch of slick condensation. My shoulder slammed into a wall. Pain flared down my arm. I kept going. I didn't look back. The sonar ping followed me through the metal like a laugh. Ping, ping, ping. And underneath it, for just a moment, a softer sound like tapping, like someone answering. I hit the main corridor where the lights were brighter and the air smelled like microwave food. I burst past the galley entrance, past a bored night cook who blinked at me like I was insane. I didn't stop until I reached the central stairwell that had a camera dome glaring down like an eye. The footsteps stopped, not faded, not retreated, just stopped, like someone hit pause. I stood there shaking, pretending to adjust my coveralls because the thought of looking like prey made me want to puke. My heart hammered so hard I could feel in my teeth. My skin prickled under sweat that turned cold immediately in the AC. I forced myself to walk, fast but not sprinting, back toward dive control. Routine, I told myself. Look normal. Don't give the ship a reason to notice you. When I finally dared to glance back down the corridor toward the service passage, it was empty. No wet footsteps. No sados. And when I went back later with the night security guy, big dude named Toma, who'd been ex-military and loved pretending this vessel was a base under siege, the staging door was closed and dogged like it always was. We opened it. No pot. No men. Just racks and hoses, and that stupid drip from the pipe overhead, steady as a clock. Toma gave me the look men give when they've decided you're either joking or losing it. You see a ghost submarine, buddy, he said, half smiling like he wanted to laugh. I know what I saw. I snapped, harsher than I meant to. Exhaustion and fear make you mean. Check the fucking cameras. He did. The camera at the stairwell showed me running, wild-eyed, shoulders hunched. The camera at the main corridor showed nothing behind me. No two men strolling after. No pod being moved. Just empty corridor. The service passage cameras were offline. Not uncommon, Thomas said. Moisture. Corrosion. These old boats are always eating their own wiring, he joked. I didn't laugh. I went to my cabin and locked the door, then checked the porthole dog, then checked it again. I pressed my ear to the metal wall like a kid listening for parents. I could hear the ocean through it, deep, constant pressure, the faintest creak of steel. And I swear to God, from somewhere far below, I heard a knock. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Like a signal. I didn't sleep more than 2 hours. When I did drift off, I kept jolting awake, convinced the cabin door was sliding open silently, and someone was standing over my bunk in a dry suit. Morning came gray and sour. Offshore mornings aren't sunrises. They're the lights changing and the sky going from black to wet concrete. My coffee tasted like nothing. My mouth stayed metallic. I did my checks like a robot because I didn't know what else to do. Normal is a life raft. Around midday, I told myself I was being stupid. I told myself it was probably a contractor pod, some inspection crew, parked somewhere it shouldn't have been, and I startled someone and they freaked. I told myself the cameras being offline was normal. I told myself the knocking was pipes expanding. Then I went out to the open deck for a smoke and saw the note. It wasn't in an envelope. It was folded once and tucked neatly under the clip of my dive helmet locker. My locker, not a general notice board, not a random place, like someone had walked past all the other gear and chosen mine specifically. My name wasn't on the outside. That's what chilled me most. Offshore, everything is labeled. Here, it wasn't labeled because they didn't need it. Inside, written in careful, tidy handwriting that looked like it belonged to someone who never rushed. Wrong hatch. Next time, I stood there with the paper trembling between my fingers. The wind off the sea was cold enough to sting my eyes. The deck beneath me vibrated with the vessel's steady power. Far below, somewhere under that steel, the habitat sat in darkness, and my brain painted it full of men in suits waiting with patient hands. A deckhand walked by and asked if I was all right. I heard myself say, "Yeah, just paperwork," and I smiled like a liar. My face felt wrong doing it. All day I felt watched. Every time I walked past a bulkhead, I caught myself glancing at the polished metal for reflections that didn't belong. Every time the sonar ping stuttered, my spine tightened. I asked maintenance about the service passage cameras in a tone that sounded casual and came out desperate. "Been acting up," the maintenance lead said, not looking up from his clipboard. "Salt eats everything. We'll get to it. Get to it, Win." I pressed. He finally looked at me, annoyed now. "When we get to it, man. You want to fix it? Go grab a wrench." I almost grabbed him by the collar. Instead, I walked away because I couldn't explain without sounding insane. That evening, I changed my route to my cabin. I avoided the service passage like it had teeth. I stayed in lit corridors. I made sure I was never alone if I could help it. I ate dinner too fast and barely tasted it. I tried to convince myself I was safe because offshore is controlled. There are cameras. There are radios. There are people. Water doesn't care about any of that, but I tried. When my shift ended, I didn't take the shortcut. I went through the galley, nodded at guys watching a game rerun, made small talk like it was a shield. My hands kept clenching and unclenching. I hated myself for it. I'm not a rookie. I've pulled a diver up who was blue. I've watched a man cry because his buddy didn't come back from a bell run. I've kept my head in real emergencies. But this wasn't an emergency with rules. This was something personal. I got to my cabin. I locked the door. I checked the porthole. I sat on the bunk fully dressed and waited for my heart to slow down. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. No text. Just a photo. It was grainy, taken in low light. The angle was slightly off, like whoever took it was trying not to be noticed. I recognized the spot instantly. The main corridor by the galley, 10 minutes earlier. The back of my head filled most of the frame. My shoulders hunched the same way they do when I'm tired. I was wearing the same coveralls, the same grease smear on my left sleeve. You could even see the little tear near my pocket I kept meaning to stitch. And if you looked past me, if you really focused, you could see a reflection in the polished steel of a bulkhead panel. A white shape behind me. Rounded edges, unmarked. Upot. Parked somewhere it should not be, close enough that the person taking the photo could catch it in reflection without showing it directly. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I was going to be sick. I went to the porthole and pulled the curtain aside, careful like the glass would make noise. All you can see from a cabin porthole is ocean and a slice of deck, maybe the glow from a work light. But down along the side of the vessel, just below the surface, there was a shape pressed against the hull. White, smooth, no markings. A transport pod, half submerged, latched to us like a parasite. Its external lights were off, but I could see the faint shimmer of its outline in the dark water when the ship's lights hit it at the right angle. And I could hear it, not an engine roar, just a low, thrumming vibration through the hull, like a big cat purring, like it was alive and pleased. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time it was text. Opened the wrong hatch for us. I backed away from the porthole, so fast I hit the bunk. My breath came sharp and thin. I didn't even realize I was whispering, "No, no, no," until I heard myself. Then came a knock. Not on my cabin door. Through the wall. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. It traveled through steel and in a bone. My teeth clicked together hard enough to hurt. I pressed my palm against the bulkhead, stupidly, like I could feel something on the other side. The ocean doesn't knock, but something did. I grabbed my radio with shaking hands and keyed it. "Toma," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Security. I need you at C deck, cabin. Static, not normal hiss. Thick, wet static like someone breathing into the mic underwater." I tried again. "Toma, do you copy?" A faint sound came back. Not a voice. A ping, like sonar. Then a whisper, so close to my ear, I jerked the radio away, convinced someone was behind me. "Wrong hatch," it breathed. I threw the radio onto the bunk like it burned. I stared at it, chest heaving. My cabin suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were leaning in, like the pressure outside was creeping closer. I did the only thing my brain could land on. I ran for the door. I yanked it open and stepped into the corridor. The corridor was empty, lights humming, air cold. No men in suits. No sados. Just a normal offshore silence. I turned left toward the stairwell, meaning to get to the control room to put people and cameras and locked doors between me and whatever was under that hole. My foot slid. Water. A thin sheet of water spread across the corridor floor, gleaming under the lights. That corridor never flooded. It was inside, above the waterline. The floor should have been dry except for condensation. This wasn't condensation. It was too cold, too clean. It smelled like deep ocean, brine, and something ancient, like a rock you break open that hasn't seen air in a million years. It seeped from under the service hatch cover at the far end of the corridor. The hatch cover that led down toward the moon pool access. The wrong hatch. I stood there, frozen, staring at that thin line of water crawling across the deck toward my boots like it had intent. Behind me, from inside my cabin, came a soft sound. A drip. Slow. Patient. As if something had followed me in and was taking its time. I didn't turn around. I walked because my legs wouldn't sprint anymore. They were too full of adrenaline and dread, down the corridor away from the spreading water. Each step felt like waiting, even though the floor barely glistened. The sonar ping somewhere deep in the ship shifted again, that same wrong note that made my molars ache. Ping, ping, ping. And underneath, the tapping answered. Knock, knock, knock. Like they were already inside the hull, finding their way up, politely asking the ship to open. I reached the stairwell and hammered the call button for security, for anyone. The intercom above the door crackled. Dive control to all units, acknowledge. A voice started, then cut into garbled mush. I forced myself up the stairs 2 at a time. The metal rail was slick under my palm, damp like someone had been touching it with wet gloves. On the next deck, I slammed through the door into the main corridor. Still empty, but the air was different up here. Warmer, heavy, like a storm building. I started running again, because that's what you do when you can't hear your own thoughts. Dive control was at the forward section, sealed behind a heavy door with a keypad. As I approached, I saw the door was slightly open. Not wide, just ajar, like the staging door had been. That tiny gap, that tiny sliver of darkness, hit me harder than any monster could have. My whole body screamed don't. I stopped so fast I almost fell. From inside dive control, I heard voices. 2 of them. One was familiar. Our dive supervisor, Rich, low and irritated. The other was calm, smooth, like the man in the pod. I'm telling you, Rich was saying, we don't have authorization for an unscheduled bell run tonight. I don't give a shit who you say you are. The calm voice answered, muffled by the door. We're not asking for a bell run. We're asking for access. That's all. You open the hatch, and you can go back to your routines. I'm not opening shit, Rich snapped. You show me paperwork, or you get off my vessel. A pause. Then the calm voice said, very softly, wrong hatch. Next time, Rich laughed once, sharp and angry. The fuck does that mean? I should have turned and run then. I should have gone straight to the bridge, tripped every alarm, screamed at the captain until they cut engines and called the Coast Guard and drag us to port. Instead, I stepped forward because Rich was my supervisor and if he was in there with someone who shouldn't be. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Dive control looked normal at first. Glowing monitors, sonar readouts, comms panels, coffee cups, the cramped familiarity of men who live on caffeine and pressure charts. Then I saw the wet footprints. They led from the door to the main console. And standing by that console, half turned toward Rich, was a man in a dark dry suit, hood down, smiling like he'd been invited. Rich stood opposite him, fists clenched, face red, tried to look bigger than the fear in his eyes. The suited man looked at me like we'd made a dinner appointment and I was late. Hey, he said, you found us. Rich spun toward me. What the hell is this? He demanded, voice cracking with anger. Do you know this guy? My mouth opened. Nothing came out. My throat was full of that metallic taste again, like blood. The man's smile widened a fraction. He knows, he said, like it was a joke between us. The sonar screen behind him flickered. For a split second, the black and green display showed a shape pressed against our hull. white outline, smooth curve. Then the screen glitched and filled with static. And through the static, I heard it. Not over the speakers, inside my head, inside my teeth. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. The man in the dry suit tilted his head, listening, pleased. "They're here," he murmured. Rich's eyes darted to the sonar, then back. "Who the fuck are they?" The man didn't answer Rich. He looked at me instead, like my response mattered more. "You can make this easy," he said. "Open the hatch." "Wrong one. The one you keep closed because you're afraid of what comes through." "I don't know what you're talking about." I managed, and my voice sounded like someone else's. He sighed, like I was being stubborn for no reason. "You work with pressure every day," he said. "You live on the edge of it. You know what's down there. You've heard it on the pings. You felt it in the hull. Don't pretend." Rich barked a laugh, but came out wrong. "This is bullshit," he said, but his hand hovered near the emergency alarm. "I'm calling the captain." The man's eyes flicked to Rich's hand. His smile didn't change, but the air in the room tightened. "Go ahead," the man said calmly. "Call whoever you like. You can't call the thing that owns this water." Rich slammed his palm down on the alarm button. Nothing happened. No klaxon, no flashing lights, just that wet static on the comms, thick as drowning. Rich hit it again, harder. "Come on," he shouted, voice rising. The suited man watched him with mild interest, like Rich was a child banging on a toy that stopped working. Then the tapping started again. But now it wasn't distant. It came from the wall of dive control itself, through the bulkhead, right behind the sonar console. Knock, knock, knock. Rich froze, eyes wide, breath caught. I could see sweat pop on his forehead. The suited man's shoulders relaxed, like he'd been waiting for that cue. "See," he said softly. "They're polite. They knock." Rich swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing. What is that?" The man's gaze stayed on me. "Tell him," he said. I shook my head without meaning to. "I don't." Knock, knock, knock. This time, something scraped slow along the bulkhead from the outside, like fingernails dragged across steel. The sound made my skin crawl. It wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of intent that makes you feel like prey even in a sealed room. Rich backed up a step. "This is a prank," he said, louder, desperate. "This is some sick fucking prank." "Toma," he shouted at the comm panel. "Security to dive control now." The comm panel answered with a sonar ping. Then, faintly, a voice that sounded like Toma but wrong, stretched thin like it was being pulled through a hose filled with water. "Wrong hatch," it whispered. Rich stared at the panel like it had grown teeth. The suited man leaned in slightly toward me, lowering his voice like we were sharing a secret. "Open it," he said, "or they'll open it themselves. And then you don't get to choose who gets taken first." My heart slammed against my ribs. My hands clenched so hard my nails bit my palms. "Take it," I echoed, and the word tasted like rust. The man's smile finally sharpened into something that wasn't friendly at all. "We don't have time," he said. "They don't like waiting." The sonar ping hit that wrong note again, high, harsh, scraping. The monitors flickered. One of them briefly showed a camera feed I didn't recognize, a view into the moon pool access chamber, dimly lit, water glassy black below the grating. Something pale floated just under the surface. Not foam, not debris, a shape like a hand, palm up, waiting. I jerked my eyes away, nausea rising. "Rich," I said, voice shaking. "We need to." Rich wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the suited man with raw hatred. "Get off my control deck," he growled. "Now!" The suited man didn't move. He lifted one hand slowly and pointed, not at Rich, at the hatch control panel on the far wall, the one that controlled access to the moon pool and the subsea service lock. "The wrong hatch," he said again, like a prayer. And the water under the moon pool, somewhere below us, answered with 3 patient knocks that vibrated up through the ship's bones. Rich looked like he wanted to swing on the guy. That's what I remember most clearly. His jaw working like he was chewing glass, his fist clenched so hard his knuckles went pale. Rich was the kind of dive supervisor who thought shouting at the ocean counted as leadership. He'd worked North Sea, Gulf, West Africa. He'd buried friends. He'd stared down real emergencies with that ugly con man get when fear is a tool. And now he was standing in his own control room, in front of his own boards, with some uninvited asshole in a dry suit smiling like he owned the place. "Get off my deck," Rich said again, and his voice dropped into that dangerous quiet. The guy didn't even blink. He just kept one hand hovering near the hatch control panel like he was pointing at a vending machine. The tapping came again from the bulkhead behind the console. Knock, knock, knock. Not random. Not pipes. Not ship noises. You could feel the timing in it. Like Morse code, but older. Like it belonged to something that learned patience before we learned fire. Rich's eyes flicked to the wall, then back to the suited man. "If you're some contractor, some Navy spook, I don't give a flying fuck," he snapped. "You're trespassing. You're off this vessel in the next 10 seconds, or I put you down." The suited man's smile softened like he was indulging him. "You can try," he said, "but you'll be wasting time you don't have." I finally found my voice. "Rich," I said low, try not to shake. "The cameras are down in the service passage. Security's comms are." "I don't care," Rich cut in. "This is my control room." He lunged, not at the man's face. Rich wasn't stupid. He went for the man's chest unit. Rebreather slung, hoses, anything to grab and yank him off balance. A quick, dirty move you use when you're done talking. His hand hit the suited man's dry suit and stuck. That's the only word for it. Stuck like the suit was tacky. Like Rich had grabbed something wet and cold and it had decided not to let go. Rich's eyes went wide. "What the?" The suited man didn't move. He didn't even tense. He just watched Rich's hand like a teacher watching a kid put a finger in a candle flame. Rich yanked. His whole body jerked forward instead. He stumbled, caught himself, tried to pull back again, and it was like something tugged the other way. Like the suit wasn't fabric, it was a surface with pressure behind it. Rich's mouth opened. No sound came out first. Then he made this choking noise like he'd swallowed water. The suited man leaned in, almost gently. "Don't do that," he murmured. Rich's feet slid. He scrambled, boots squealing on the deck plate. His free hand slapped at the console for leverage. And then, God, I can still see it. Water beaded up on the suited man's sleeve. Not dripping down from condensation. Beading up from underneath, like sweat rising through skin. The beads rolled toward Rich's palm and vanished into the place where his glove met the suit, as if sucked in. Rich's forearm went rigid. Veins stood out. His face went red, then oddly pale around the mouth. "Let go," I barked, moving without thinking. I grabbed Rich's shoulder, tried to haul him back. The cold hit my hand through his coveralls. Not AC cold, deep cold, the kind that lives where sunlight never goes. My fingers numbed instantly. Rich's eyes met mine, and I saw real fear there. Not anger, not macho bullshit. Fear like a diver with a broken hose. The suited man finally looked at me with something like disappointment. "You know better," he said quiet. "You don't pull against pressure." Rich gagged. His lips went bluish. He started making bubbling sounds, which made no sense because we were in air. Then the bulkhead behind the console knocked again, harder. Knock, knock, knock. The lights flickered. The sonar screen hiccuped and went black for half a heartbeat, then flashed a strange, tight spiral pattern like something coiling. Rich's knees buckled. I did the dumbest thing imaginable. I punched the suited man. Not a clean punch, more like a panic swing. My fist hit his jaw. It felt like hitting wet rubber over bone. It gave, then snapped back. The impact stung my knuckles. The suited man's head barely moved. He didn't get angry. He didn't even frown. He smiled wider, like I'd proven a point. "That doesn't work up here either," he said. Rich made a sound like he was trying to inhale through a mouthful of seawater. His eyes rolled slightly. My brain finally latched onto one thing that made sense. Cut the fucking suit. I lunged for the emergency tool drawer under the console. Every control room has one. Bandage shears, a strap cutter, spare comm cable, whatever the last guy shoved in there. My hand shook so hard, I fumbled it open. I got my fingers around the strap cutter. The suited man watched me do it with calm interest, like I was selecting a utensil. I hooked the blade under the edge of his sleeve where Rich's glove was stuck and pulled. The blade met resistance like thick cartilage. It didn't slice clean. It dragged, squealing faintly like cutting through old sealant. I saw a line open in the dry suit material, and instead of fabric and skin underneath, there was water. Not a pocket, not a leak. A moving sheet of dark water pressed up against the cut as if the suit contained an ocean. It bulged outward, held in place by surface tension that shouldn't exist, and for a split second I saw something behind it. Pale shapes, jointed too many fingers. My stomach flipped. The water pushed out through the cut and wrapped around my wrist, cold as death. I yelped and jerked back. The water came with me like a hand clinging, then snapped away, retreating into the suit like it had never been there. Rich's glove finally tore free with a sound like suction breaking. He collapsed to the deck, choking, coughing, and on his lips there was brine. He rolled onto his side and hacked like he was drowning. Foam and salty spit sprayed the floor. His eyes were wild. "What the fuck?" he rasped. "What the fuck is this?" The suited man looked down at him almost sadly. "You see," he said, "we can do this the hard way. They don't mind." I stumbled back, shaking my hand like that would bring feeling back into it. My skin burned and numbed at once. I could still feel phantom fingers around my wrist, like the memory of being grabbed. Rich tried to scramble up. He made it to his knees, then froze when the bulkhead scraped again. Slow, deliberate, like nails. Rich's gaze followed the sound, and I watched his face change as he understood something I didn't want to understand. "Moon pool," he whispered. The suited man nodded once. "Wrong hatch," he said again, soft. Rich spat on the floor. "Go to hell." The suited man's eyes didn't leave mine. "You're the one with the keys," he said to me. "He's just the loud one." "I don't have keys," I snapped. "It's a control panel. It's locked out by procedure. Two-step authorization. Supervisor and bridge. You can get it," he said, as if we were discussing ordering food. "Or you can watch them come through anyway." "They're not coming through," I said, and I heard the desperation in it. "We're above waterline. We're sealed." The suited man's smile twitched. "So, is your mouth," he said, "until it's full." I swallowed hard. My tongue tasted like copper and salt. Rich hauled himself up using the console. His hand shook so bad he could barely steady. "Listen," he barked, voice rough. "You're not fucking opening anything. I don't care if it's the Navy. I don't care if it's aliens. We call the captain. We call the company man. We lock this down." "The comms are compromised," I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. Rich slammed his palm on the console again. "Not the alarm, the hard metal edge. Then we fucking run a cable. The suited man sighed, like we were wasting his evening. He reached out, fingers brushing the hatch control panel. The panel beeped. Not an error. Not locked out. A polite confirmation beep like a pin had been accepted. Rich's eyes bugged. "That's impossible." The suited man didn't even look at him. He typed again, slow, confident. The hatch control screen lit up with the access menu. I felt my blood go cold. Those codes weren't public. They weren't even written down. They rotated. They were tied to the bridge authorization through the vessel's internal network. The suited man tapped Subsea Service Lock, and a secondary option popped up beneath it in smaller text. Auxiliary access, restricted. That option shouldn't have been visible. Most of the crew didn't even know it existed. It was an old legacy access point to an auxiliary trunk that ran down toward the habitat interface. It was sealed and tagged out because it was tied into an abandoned module, an old listening post rumored from back when the military played games in deep water. Guys joked about it. Ghost Hatch, they called it. Will the mermaids come in? Nobody clicked it because it was grayed out and because even thinking about it made the hair on your arms lift. The suited man highlighted it. The cursor hovered there like a fingertip over a trigger. I moved without thinking. I grabbed the comm headset off the hook and slammed it on my head thumbed the hardline channel that went straight to the bridge through a physical connection. No wireless, no shared system. Bridge, I said in the mic, bridge, this is dive control, emergency. Static, Vetstatic. A sonar ping answered in my ear. Then a voice calm, low, too close, wrong hatch. I ripped the headset off and flung it. It hit the wall and bounced. Rich stared at me like I'd lost it, then saw my face and seemed to finally accept that no, this wasn't a prank. He turned and barreled toward the door. I'm going to the bridge, he said. You. The suited man didn't stop him. He just watched. Rich hit the door, shoved it open, and stopped dead. The corridor outside dive control was flooded. Not ankle deep, not a puddle. A smooth sheet of water filled the hallway like a hallway-shaped aquarium. It didn't slosh. It didn't pour in from somewhere. It just was. And inside it, suspended like dust motes in a beam of light, were tiny points of pale glow. Bioluminescence. Rich stood at the threshold, mouth open. The water didn't spill into dive control. It held itself perfectly at the doorway, surface flat and trembling, like it was waiting for an invitation. One of the glowing points drifted closer, and for a second I could make out the outline of something small and jointed, like a shrimp, except it moved with intent, and it turned as if it could see us. The suited man stepped up behind Rich and spoke over his shoulder, almost affectionate. That's them, he said. They've found the seams. Rich backed up slowly, eyes locked on the water. This is not possible, he whispered, and he sounded like he was pleading with the universe. The suited man's voice went flat. Everything is possible under enough pressure, he said. The water in the corridor pulsed once like a lung, and from somewhere deep inside that hallway-shaped ocean, something knocked. Knock, knock, knock. Right on the bulkhead beside the door from the outside. Rich flinched like he'd been slapped. I grabbed his arm and yanked him back into dive control, slammed the door shut, dogged it. The wool spun tight under my hands. My fingers slipped on moisture that hadn't been there a second ago. We stood panting in the cramped room, staring at the sealed door like it was paper. What do you want? Rich shouted at the suited man, voice cracking. Who the fuck are you? What are you? The suited man turned his head slightly, considering. I'm what fits, he said. I'm what can speak your language without hurting you. Most of them can't. Not up here. Most of them, I echoed, and my stomach tightened. He looked at me again. You've heard the pings, he said. You felt the hull. You live close to their world. You're the closest thing you have to understanding them. Bullshit. I snapped because if I didn't argue, I would crumble. This is hallucinations, pressure sickness, some gas leak. He laughed once, soft. You're in air at 1 atmosphere, he said. Try again. Rich wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, staring at the brine like it was blood. We're calling the captain, he said, and it sounded pathetic even to him. The suited man shrugged. Call whoever you want, he said. The water is already in your corridors. As if to prove it, a drip hit the floor near my boot. Then another. Then, from the ceiling, a thin line of water crawled along a seam and gathered into a bead, then dropped. It wasn't condensation. It was too fast, too purposeful. Rich's eyes followed it up. No, he said, and there was real fear now. No, no, no. The suited man gestured at the hatch control panel. Open it, he said simply. We open that auxiliary trunk, we flood, Rich barked. That's why it's restricted. It's sealed off from an old module. It's not rated for. It's rated, the suited man cut in calm. It's rated for them. I couldn't breathe right. The room felt like it had less oxygen, like the air itself was thickening with humidity and something else. I kept seeing that cut in his suit, the water pressed behind it, the pale fingers. Why us? I said, because my brain needed a reason like a drowning man needs air. Why this vessel? Why now? The suited man's smile faded for the first time. Because you're parked over their road, he said. Rich blinked. There. Your platform drilled into a shelf you didn't understand, the suited man said, and his tone got sharper, like he was finally tired of explaining. Your ROV scraped something that should have stayed sealed. Your habitat sits on an edge you weren't supposed to touch. That's bullshit, Rich snapped, but his voice lacked conviction now. We're in a sanction block. We have surveys. Surveys, the suited man repeated, and there was contempt in it. You mapped the surface of a door and thought you owned the room behind it. The knocking came again, closer from the door. Knock, knock, knock. The dogged will trembled under pressure like someone leaning on it from the other side. Rich backed away, eyes darting, hands shaking. He looked like a cornered animal. I looked at the hatch control panel and felt the weight of it. A piece of plastic and metal that could decide whether we lived or drowned. The suited man stepped closer to me, voice soft again. Open the wrong hatch, he said, almost kindly, and they'll take what they came for. Maybe just you. Maybe just the ones who dropped things into their water. My skin crawled. Dropped things? I whispered, remembering his first line. The suited man's eyes flicked toward the sonar console, then back. You dropped more than tools, he said. You dropped sound. You dropped heat. You dropped blood. Rich barked. We're not sacrificing anybody. The suited man shrugged. Then you're volunteering everyone. A crack sounded from somewhere above us, metal popping under stress. Water dripped faster now, lines forming on the ceiling, tracing seams like veins. Rich grabbed a chair and swung it at the hatch control panel. It smashed into the screen, cracked the plastic casing, sparks spitting. For one glorious second I thought, good. Destroy it. Take away the choice. Then the panel beeped. The cracked screen flickered, then stabilized. The menu was still there. The suited man didn't flinch at the chair. He just looked at Rich with something like pity. You can't break what's already theirs, he said. Rich's face twisted. He looked like he might cry from rage. Then how do we stop it? The suited man's smile came back, smaller. You don't, he said. You only decide how much it hurts. The door will tremble again. The dogging creaked. On the far wall, the monitor that showed the moon pool access, one of the feeds we use for operations, flickered on by itself. The feed showed the grading platform above the moon pool, lights dim and hazy. The water below was black and perfectly still. Then a ripple formed, not from movement under the surface, like the surface itself was being pressed from above. A pale shape rose slow, not breaking the water, but pushing into it like a hand pushing in a plastic wrap. Something tapped the underside of the grating. Knock, knock, knock. Rich stared at the monitor like he was watching his own execution. I did the only thing left that felt like action. I ran, not out of fear, though yeah, fear drove my legs, but because if I stayed in that room, I was going to let someone else decide for me. I shoved past Rich, past the suited man, and grabbed the manual escape handle near the rear hatch of dive control, the one that opened into the emergency corridor. Rich shouted my name. Where are you going? To the bridge, I yelled back. To the captain, to anyone with authority. The suited man didn't stop me. That should have scared me more than anything. The emergency corridor beyond dive control was supposed to be dry, narrow, boring. It was a steel throat that ran up toward the bridge and down toward machinery spaces. It smelled like paint and old metal. As soon as I stepped into it, my boots splashed. An inch of water covered the deck plates, rippling gently like it was breathing. My heart lurched. I didn't stop. I ran anyway, water slapping against my boots, soaking my pant legs, cold seeping up. The lights overhead flickered in slow waves, dim, bright dim, like underwater sun. And somewhere ahead of me, in the metal, I heard the tapping. Not behind me. Ahead. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Like they were guiding me. I hit the stairwell, took steps 2 at a time. My lungs burned. My mouth tasted like salt. The air got thicker as I climbed, humid and heavy. At the next landing, I skidded to a stop because a crewman stood there, blocking the way. It was one of the ROV techs, kid named Lyle, early 20s, always chewing gum like he was trying to keep himself awake. He stood in the stairwell, holding the railing with one hand, staring down at the water pooling on the steps like he couldn't understand it. Lyle, I snapped. Move. He turned his head toward me slowly, like his neck was stiff. His eyes looked glassy. "It's in the stairs," he said. "What's in the stairs?" I demanded, because I couldn't afford vagueness. He blinked like he was waking up. "The sea," he whispered, and then his mouth pulled into a smile that didn't belong on his face. "Wrong hatch." My stomach dropped. I grabbed his shoulder. "Lyle, listen to me. Get to the muster station. Now, do you hear me?" His skin felt cold through his coveralls, damp. He didn't resist my grip. He just kept smiling, eyes unfocused. Then he opened his mouth and coughed. A thin stream of water poured out. Not spit. Water. Clear and cold. He coughed again, and something pale flicked past his teeth like a tiny luminous shrimp. I jerked back, horrified. Lyle's smile widened. He leaned forward and tapped the railing with his knuckles. Knock, knock, knock. Then he stepped aside like a polite doorman. I ran past him, stomach heaving, and didn't look back because I couldn't handle seeing what happened next. By the time I hit the bridge deck, alarms should have been screaming. There should have been crew running, doors dogging, radios blaring. Instead, the corridor was quiet. Too quiet. The bridge door was open. The bridge is always loud. Machines humming, voices, radar beeps, the constant chatter of radio traffic. This one was muted, like someone had turned the volume down. I burst in and found the captain standing at the front windows, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the black sea like he was admiring it. The first officer sat at the console, headset on, not moving. A corporate rep, company man in clean polo, always smelled like cologne and paperwork, stood near the chart table with his arms crossed. They all turned their heads toward me at the same time. Slow, calm, smiling. My heart tried to climb out of my throat. "Captain," I panted. There's someone in dive control. The corridors are flooding. The comms are." The captain raised a hand gently, like he was calming child. "We're aware," he said. The corporate rep smiled wider. "No need to get excited," he said. "We're handling it." "You're not handling shit," I snapped and my voice cracked. "Rich is down there with," I swallowed. "With something. We need a muster. We need to call for assistance. We need to break off station." The first officer's fingers tapped the console. Knock, knock, knock. I stared at him. "What the fuck are you doing?" He didn't answer. His eyes stayed on his radar screen. The captain spoke without turning fully. "We can't break off," he said. "We're over the wellhead. We have divers in saturation. We move, they die." "That's true," I said, fighting panic. "But if we don't?" The corporate rep stepped closer. He smelled like soap. Too clean. His eyes were bright with a calm that made my skin crawl. "You're tired," he said. "You've been on shift too long. You're seeing things." "I'm not," I said, teeth clenched. "There's water in the stairwell." Lyle is fine," the captain said, still calm. Lyle coughed up seawater, I said, voice rising. "We're not taking water on. That's not a leak. That's..." The captain finally turned and looked directly at me. His eyes were wet, not bloodshot. Well, like he'd been crying, but his face was smiling. "We've been invited," he said quietly. My stomach flipped. "Invited by who?" The corporate rep nodded toward the windows. Outside, alongside the vessel, the white pod floated half-submerged, pressed to the hull. In the bridge light, I could see its smooth curves better now. It looked like a blank tooth against the dark water. Beneath it, in the sea, pale glows moved in slow spirals. Bioluminescent points like a drifting constellation. The sea itself looked wrong, too still, too black like oil. I backed up, bumping into the chart table. "No," I said, because it was the only word I had left. The first officer's headset crackled. Not radio traffic. A ping, then a voice, soft and wet. "Wrong hatch." The captain's smile widened. "They want the auxiliary," he said, like he was discussing a maintenance request. "The restricted trunk. The old access." "We don't use that," I said. "It's sealed for a reason." The corporate rep's smile never wavered. "Sometimes," he said, "procedures change." I stared at him, and something in my head clicked into place. The suited man had said he was what could speak our language. That implied the others didn't. But these men were speaking the wrong words like they'd been taught, like puppets with someone's hand up inside. "Where's Toma?" I demanded, desperate for one normal human. "Where's security?" The captain pointed lazily toward the bridge door. "Down below," he said, "taking care of the dive team." My gut clenched. "Our dive team's in saturation," I snapped. "They're in chambers." "They're not." The corporate rep interrupted. "You're gonna help," he said, voice gentle. "You're the dive safety officer. You know how to do it correctly." "Do what?" I whispered, even though I knew. He nodded toward the ship's internal comm panel. "Authorize the hatch," he said. I shook my head hard. "No." The corporate rep's smile tightened at the edges. "Then we'll have to make you," he said, and his tone stayed polite, which made it worse. The captain's fingers tapped the window frame. Knock, knock, knock. And right on cue, the hull answered from below, a deep vibration that rolled up through the bridge deck into my bones. Knock, knock, knock. I flinched. The first officer's lips moved, barely audible. "Wrong hatch," he whispered like a prayer. My hands clenched. I looked around the bridge for something, anything I could use. A flare gun, a fire axe, a radio handset. There were tools, but they felt useless against whatever was bending the ship into an aquarium. I grabbed the emergency radio mic off the wall, the one tied to the APERB and distress broadcast. If anything still worked, it would be that. It was designed to scream even when the ship was dead. I thumbed the cover, hit the distress. The mic hissed. Then the hiss turned wet. Then a ping. The corporate rep watched me with mild amusement. "That won't reach anyone," he said. "It's satellite," I snapped. "It doesn't go through your fucking..." The captain stepped closer. "It goes through the air," he said calm. "And the air belongs to the water out here." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw myself out the bridge window just to stop hearing their calm voices. Instead, I did something I've regretted ever since. I hit the captain. I swung the mic like a blunt object and cracked it across his cheek. It landed with a sickening thud. His head snapped sideways. For 1 second, his smile broke, replaced by shock. Then his cheek dimpled. Not bruised, dimpled like wet clay. Water beaded on his skin where the mic hit. It rolled down his jaw and dripped onto the deck. He turned back to me slowly, smile returning like a mask being pulled back into place. "You shouldn't do that," he said, gently, and his voice had a gurgle under it. The corporate rep sighed. "He's going to make this messy," he said to the first officer, like I wasn't standing there. The first officer nodded once. Then the bridge lights flickered. Not a power surge, a rhythm. Dim, bright, dim. Like underwater. The windows fogged from the edges inward with condensation that formed too fast, crawling like frost. The fog didn't smear randomly. It traced shapes. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. On the glass. Like fingers tapping from the outside. Except we were above the surface and the sea outside was calm and black and not touching those windows. My throat closed. I backed up, cornered between the chart table and the bulkhead. "Stop," I rasped. The corporate rep's smile softened again. "Help us," he said. "Open the hatch, and this ends clean." I shook my head because I didn't know what else to do. Then a new sound cut through the bridge, an actual human alarm. A diver comm speaker crackled to life on the bridge repeater channel, the one tied to saturation. That line was hardwired too, buried deep, shielded because divers' lives depend on it. A voice came through, thin, distorted, but unmistakably human. "Dive control, bridge, anybody," the voice gasped. "We've got something outside the habitat." The captain's smile faltered. The corporate rep's eyes narrowed. The voice continued, frantic now. "It's knocking. It's knocking on the fucking acrylic. It's Jesus. There's lights down here like a city." "Who is this?" I shouted at the speaker. "Say your name." A cough, and "It's Malik, Sat 2. Listen, the old trunk. There's water coming in through the sealed flange, like it's coming backward." My chest seized. Malik. He was a good diver. Solid. Not a prankster. If Malik was scared, something was wrong at the bottom. Malik's voice rose into a shout. It's not a leak. It's like the sea is pushing itself through the metal. We've got something in the access tube. A harsh scraping sound blasted through the speaker, loud enough to make everyone flinch. Then a deep knock that rattled the bridge repeater. Knock, knock, knock. Malik screamed. It's opening. It's... The line cut. Wet static filled the speaker. A ping. Then, softly, a voice that was not Malik. Wrong hatch. I stared at the speaker, horrified, and in that moment I understood what the suited man had meant about time. This wasn't just about getting them onto our ship. It was about the divers, the habitat, the seal at the bottom. They're already down there, already inside the system. The captain's comm cracked for the first time. Dive control. He barked into his bridge mic, "What's your status?" Static. Ping. The corporate rep's smile returned, controlled. "We don't have time for the saturation team," he said smoothly, like he was making a financial decision. "We have a schedule." I snapped my head toward him. "Are you insane? People are down there." He looked at me like I was naive. "We lose time," he said. "We lose money. We lose contracts. You lose lives," I hissed. He shrugged. "We lose lives all the time," he said, and the casualness in it made me want to vomit. The captain turned sharply, jaw working, and for a second I saw the man he used to be. Hard, practical, not possessed. Then his face twitched, and water beaded at the corner of his mouth like drool. The first officer's fingers tapped the console again. Knock, knock, knock. The fog on the windows pulsed. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. My brain screamed one word. Run. I darted for the bridge door. The captain lunged, faster than he should have been able to move, and grabbed my arm. His hand was cold and wet. Not sweaty. Well, like he'd dipped it in seawater. His grip burned my skin. I jerked away with a yelp, and his fingers left behind a sheen of brine on my sleeve. "Don't," he said, voice thick. "You have to help. I'm not opening anything." I snarled, pulling free. The corporate rep stepped into my path, still smiling. "We can do this without you," he said, "but you'll regret it." "Fuck you," I spat and shoved past him. His shoulder felt oddly soft, like pushing into a waterlogged sponge. I nearly gagged. I hit the corridor outside the bridge and ran, splashing through shallow water that hadn't been there before. The ship felt wrong, like it had shifted into a different medium. The air was humid enough to taste. Every surface gleamed with moisture. I passed crewmen standing in hallways, staring at walls, tapping rails with their knuckles in that same rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. Some of them whispered, "Wrong hatch." Some of them just smiled. I ran down toward the muster station because that's where people should be in an emergency, where loud human voices and order might snap the spell. I hit the alarm pull station and yanked. Nothing. No klaxon. Just a wet gurgle through the speaker above the pull station, like the ship itself was swallowing. I slammed my fist into the bulkhead. Pain shot on my arm. I forced myself to breathe. Think. Hardline. Physical. Something that didn't go through the ship's network. Something that wasn't being turned into pings. The fire control room. Every vessel has a manual fire pump room with mechanical valves and analog gauges. A place where you can isolate sections, cut ventilation, flood certain compartments if needed. It's old school. Steel and levers. No fancy software. If I could get there, maybe I could isolate the auxiliary trunk. Maybe I could physically lock it out. I ran toward it. The corridors got colder as I descended, closer to the machinery spaces. The hum of engines felt dampened, like it was underwater too. The smell shifted. Less food, more oil and bilge, and something sour. I turned a corner and nearly collided with Toma. He stood in the corridor outside the fire control room, leaning against the bulkhead like he was tired. His uniform was soaked. Not damp. Soaked like he'd been swimming. His eyes were glassy like Lyle's. I stopped short. "Toma," I said, and I hated how hopeful it sounded. "Thank God. Listen." He smiled. "Wrong hatch," he whispered. My stomach dropped. "No," I said. "No, no, no. Toma, it's me." Snap out of it. He pushed off the bulkhead and stepped closer, slow and calm. Water dripped from his sleeves, hitting the deck in steady ticks. Drip, drip, drip. Each drip sounded too loud. Toma, I said again, voice shaking. Where were you? What happened to you? He tilted his head like he was listening to a distant sound. They came through the stairs, he said softly. Not all the way, just enough. Who did? I snapped, even though I knew. He smiled wider, and his teeth looked wrong, too white, too smooth. The ones who knock, he whispered. I backed up a step. Get away from me, I said, and my hand went to my belt where I carried a small utility knife. It felt pathetic. Toma's smile didn't fade. You can stop fighting, he said, voice thick. You can open it. You can stop hurting. Fuck off, I said, my voice cracked. He took another step, and the corridor lights flickered dim, bright dim, like he carried the ocean with him. Behind him, the door to the fire control room was ajar. A thin line of water seeped from beneath it. My skin crawled. I didn't go for the knife. I went for the door behind me, an access hatch into a maintenance crawl space I knew about because my job had taught me every route through the ship like a rat through walls. I spun, grabbed the handle, yanked it open, and dove in. The crawl space was cramped and dark, metal ribs and cables, the smell of dust and old insulation. I slammed the hatch shut behind me and dogged it by feel. My hand shook so bad I fumbled the wheel. On the other side, I heard Toma's knuckles tap the metal. Knock, knock, knock. Then, softly, wrong hatch. The metal trembled, not from him pushing, from pressure on the other side, like the corridor was filling with water and leaning on the hatch. I crawled fast, elbows scraping, knees tooting. My breath came ragged. The space was hot from cables and pipes, but I could feel cold seeping in any way, like the ocean was bleeding through the ship's skin. As I crawled, I started hearing it everywhere. Tapping, not just 3 knocks, different patterns, some quick, some slow, like communication, and under it, the sonar ping, closer now inside my skull. Ping, ping, ping. I came out near the saturation control area, another sealed room with analog backups. If any place was going to be free of this bullshit, it would be SAT control. The divers' lives depended on redundancy, on systems that couldn't just be hijacked by a wet whisper. I shoved the access hatch open and rolled out onto the floor. SAT control was lit. There were 2 techs inside. Both stood with their backs to me, staring at the chamber gauges like they were hypnotized. Their hands tapped on the steel rack in that same rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. Hey, I barked, forcing authority into my voice. Look at me. We got a situation. Where's the SAT supervisor? One tech turned slowly. His eyes were wet. His lips moved. Wrong hatch, he whispered. I almost screamed. Instead, I lunged for the hardline SAT comm panel, the one that connected to the divers through copper and steel and pressure-rated cable. I grabbed the handset and jammed it to my ear. SAT 2, I said, voice shaking. Malik, do you copy? Anybody down there? Answer me. Static at first, normal, dry hiss. My heart leaped. Then a faint, thin voice crackled through. Human. Hello, it gasped. Malik, I shouted. A cough. It's Jansen, the voice said, ragged. Malik's, he's gone. He got pulled. My blood went cold. Pulled where? Jansen sobbed once, a harsh, ugly sound. Through the access tube, he said. Through the sealed trunk. It opened like it was never welded. It just peeled. My grip tightened on the handset. Listen to me, I said, forcing calm. Seal your chamber. Lock down. Do not go near the trunk. We can't, Jansen whispered. We're locked in. The trunk it's not a trunk anymore. It's like it goes somewhere else. What do you mean? I snapped. Jansen's breath hitched. There's light, he said. Not our lights. There's structures. Like walls. Like a corridor. And the water is standing there like a curtain. My stomach rolled. Jansen, listen. You're hypoxic. You're panicking. I'm not, he said, and his voice cracked with rage. I've done SAT for 12 years. I know my own head. This is real. A knock sounded through the handset, deep, resonant. Knock, knock, knock. Jansen screamed. They're here again. Jansen, I shouted. Stay back. Stay back from the... The tech behind me tapped the rack harder. Knock, knock, knock. I spun and saw he was smiling, eyes glassy. He reached toward the SAT control panel like he was going to press something. No. I roared and slammed into him, shoving him away. He felt cold and wet under his coveralls, like his skin was soaked. He stumbled, then turned and looked at me with that same calm smile. You're making it worse, he said softly. Shut up, I hissed, grabbing his shirt and pinning him against the wall. You touch that panel, and I'll... His smile widened. Wrong hatch, he breathed. Behind me, the other tech's fingers danced over the SAT control console. I lunged, but I was too late. He hit a sequence. Manual override. The panel beeped. A warning flashed. AUX trunk pressure equalization initiated. My stomach dropped through the floor. No. I screamed and slammed my palm down on the cancel. The screen flickered, then went blank, then came back with one word in calm green letters. Authorized. My hand shook. I looked at the tech, and he was smiling like a proud kid who'd completed a task. You idiot, I whispered. The SATCOM handset in my other hand crackled with Jansen's sobbing breath. Jansen, I said, voice shaking, the trunks equalizing. Get away. Get away from it now. I can't, Jansen whispered, and his voice broke. It's coming in here. A sound came through the handset, a wet scraping, like something dragging itself along metal. Then a soft, polite tapping. Knock, knock, knock. Jansen made a choking sound. It's at the chamber hatch, he whispered. It's knocking from the other side. My mouth went dry. Chamber hatch. I croaked. That's impossible. The chamber is sealed. I know, Jansen sobbed. I know. Behind me, the SAT control room door creaked. I turned slowly. Water seeped under it in a steady line, crawling across the floor toward my boots. The knocking started on the door itself. Knock, 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 like someone outside wanted in. The tech I'd pinned against the wall smiled wider. See, he whispered. They're polite. I let go of him like he'd burned me. Everything in me screamed to run, but there was nowhere left that wasn't wet, nowhere left that wasn't listening. I did the only thing that felt like fighting. I grabbed the fire axe mounted on the SAT control wall. It was heavy, real old, steel and wood, the kind of tool that doesn't care about software. I swung it into the SAT control console. The blade bit into plastic and metal. Sparks flew. The screen shattered. The beeping died. The tech screamed, an actual human scream, and then he laughed. A wet, gurgling laugh. The other tech lunged at me, hands out, not angry, just determined, like he wanted to hug me. I swung the axe handle into his chest and sent him sprawling. The door knocked again, harder. The dogging wheel rattled. Jansen's voice in my ear was a whisper now. It's opening, he sobbed. No, I said, and my voice came out like a prayer. No, no, no. The door to SAT control buckled inward slightly, like pressure pushed it. A thin crack opened at the top. Water didn't pour in. It bulged, held by surface tension, a dark sheet pressed against the crack like a mouth. And behind it I saw pale shapes, jointed fingers, moving slow and curious. My whole body went cold. I dropped the handset. I ran. I bolted out the emergency hatch at the back of SAT control and into another corridor, axe in hand like it could save me. The ship around me felt like it was sinking even though it wasn't. The floor sloshed now, water ankle-deep in places, rippling toward me like it knew where I was. Crewmen stood in doorways, smiling. Some tapped rails. Some just watched with wet eyes. Wrong hatch, they whispered as I passed. Wrong hatch. The phrase became the ship's heartbeat. I reached the lifeboat station by pure muscle memory, lungs burning, heart trying to split my ribs. There were no alarms, no muster, no officers shouting, just a quiet vessel full of water and whispering. The sea outside was unnaturally still. The white pod floated alongside like a patient shark, and at the edge of the deck, near the railing, I saw the suited man. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the black water like he was waiting for a ferry. He turned his head slightly as I approached, like he'd heard my footsteps through the hall. "You can stop running," he said gently. I raised the axe at him with shaking hands. "Stay the fuck back," I snarled. He didn't flinch. "It's done," he said. "The trunk's open. They're coming through. You can't close it now." Then I blow the ballast. I snapped, voice cracking. I cut the umbilicals. I dumped the chambers. You won't," he said, calm. "You know what that would do to the divers. You won't kill them despite the sea." I swallowed hard because he was right. I'd seen what decompression sickness did. Idevachshidman says. Foam, blood, pain. You don't do that to someone unless you're a monster. The suited man smiled like a man who'd won. "Why me?" I whispered again, and I hated how broken it sounded. He tilted his head. "Because you looked," he said. "You saw the pod. You heard the knock and didn't pretend it was pipes. And Rich." I spat. "And Malik? And Jansen? What about them?" His smile faded slightly. "They were in the way," he said simply. "They were close." A new vibration ran through the deck under my boots. Not engine hum. Something moving inside the ship. The water on deck rippled toward the center like it was being pulled. The suited man's eyes flicked to the moon pool area. "They're coming up," he murmured. The hatch cover near the moon pool access, the one we kept locked and tagged, rattled. Knock, knock, knock. The dogging bolt squealed. I backed away, axe still up, eyes darting. My brain was scrambling for a last move, a last lever to pull that wasn't software, that wasn't radio, that wasn't compromised. Then I saw it. The manual release for the lifeboat, old mechanical latch, protected under a metal cover with a seal. It wasn't connected to the ship's network. It was a physical act, a decision made with hands. I could leave. I could drop into the sea and row like hell and hope a standby boat picked me up. I could also die. The suited man watched my eyes track to it and nodded, as if giving permission. "Go," he said softly. "If you want. It won't matter." The hatch cover at the moon pool jerked upward slightly. A thin line of dark water rose with it, not pouring, but lifting like a sheet held by invisible hands. Under the sheet, pale fingers curled. My guts clenched. I made my decision. I slammed the axe blade into the lifeboat cover seal, pried it up, and yanked the manual release. The mechanism clunked, heavy and real. The lifeboat's cradle arms groaned. The suited man's smile widened. "Good," he said, almost approving. The lifeboat dropped. For a terrifying second, it felt like the ship tilted under me, like the deck was moving like a living thing trying to shake me off. Then gravity took over. The boat slammed into the water with a bone-jarring crash. Cold spray soaked my face. The smell of salt hit me like a punch. I grabbed the oars with shaking hands and started rowing, muscles screaming, lungs burning, away from the vessel. From this angle, I could see the white pod more clearly. It was still latched to the hull, sleek and blank. And I could see something else. In the water beneath the ship, the pale glows were gathering, forming lines, curves, shapes like streets, like architecture, a city of light under the Black Sea. My skin crawled. The ship's hull shuddered. A deep, horrible sound rolled across the water, a groan like steel bending. Then the deck lights flickered in that underwater rhythm, dim, bright, dim, and through the portholes I saw movement. Not crew, something pale, sliding along corridors, moving in water that shouldn't be there. The suited man stood on deck at the railing, watching me row away like a man watching someone leave a party early. He lifted a hand and tapped the railing with his knuckles. Knock, knock, knock. The ship answered, deep and resonant. Knock, knock, knock. The white pod detached. It slid away from the hull with no splash. No churn. It moved like it was on rails. It drifted toward the area under the ship where the glows were brightest. And then it sank, smooth and silent, into the black water. I rowed until my arms felt like they were tearing. My breath came in ragged sobs. I kept looking back because I couldn't stop, because part of me expected the ship to vanish or explode or surface something. What happened instead was worse. The ship stayed. It didn't sink. It didn't explode. It just quieted. The lights steadied. The hull stopped groaning. From the outside, it looked almost normal again. A big offshore vessel sitting on station under a gray sky, like a postcard of industry. If you didn't know, you'd think nothing was wrong. A standby boat found me an hour later. Maybe less, maybe more. Time was mush. They hauled me aboard, wrapped me in blankets, asked what happened. I tried to tell them. I said water in the corridors. I said unmarked pod. I said they were knocking from inside the walls. The crewmen looked at each other like I was drunk. They radioed the vessel. The vessel answered in a calm voice, captain's voice, saying there had been a minor electrical fault. No emergency, no casualties, operations continuing. They asked if I'd suffered a panic attack. I didn't fight them then. I didn't have the strength. When they brought me back to the ship the next day, because yes, they fucking brought me back, because Offshore doesn't just let you leave without paperwork. I expected chaos. I expected flooded corridors. I expected body bags. The ship was dry. The corridors were dry. The service passage cameras worked. Dive control was spotless. Rich was at his console, sipping coffee, and when he looked up at me, his eyes were normal. Dry. Human. He smiled. Rough night, he said, like we were colleagues sharing a joke. My blood went cold. I stared at him, searching his face for bruises, for brine, for anything. There was nothing. I looked at his hands. His fingers tapped the console, softly, absent-mindedly. Knock, knock, knock. I stumbled back. Rich's smile didn't change. You all right, man? He asked, voice mild. I turned and ran off the deck like a coward. They didn't stop me. They didn't chase me. They let me go ashore 2 days later with a signed NDA and a severance package that was too generous for stress-related resignation. The corporate rep, same clean polo, same cologne, sat across from me in a shore office that smelled like carpet and stale air conditioning. Through the window behind him, I could see the harbor, gray waves slapping pilings, gulls screaming. He slid the papers toward me. Sign, he said. What happened to the divers? I demanded, voice shaking. Malik, Jansen, the SAT team. He didn't blink. There were no casualties, he said. That's a lie. I snarled. I heard. He leaned forward slightly, smile polite. You heard things, he said. You were tired. You had a panic episode. You're lucky the company is taking care of you. What about I swallowed hard. The auxiliary trunk. The old module. His smile tightened. That module doesn't exist, he said. I stared at him, and for a moment I saw something move behind his eyes like a ripple. Like water shifting under ice. Sign, he repeated calm. Then you go home. You forget. You live. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. I signed because I wanted to live. I signed because I was a coward. I signed because while I sat there, I could feel a faint tapping in the building's pipes, like someone knocking from inside the walls, politely reminding me they were still near. Knock, knock, knock. After that, I tried to be normal. I moved inland for a while, or as inland as you can get without feeling claustrophobic. I took a job doing safety audits for a shipping company. Paperwork, office lights, coffee that tasted like regret. I avoided docks. I avoided aquariums. I avoided bathtubs deep enough to float in. For months, it almost worked. Then little things started happening. My sink would drip in that rhythm. 3 drops, pause, 3 drops, even after I replaced the faucet. A radiator would ping at night, and if I counted the metal pops, it matched the sonar pattern I'd heard. In grocery stores, I'd catch my reflection in the glass freezer doors and swear I saw a smooth white curve behind me, just out of frame. I told myself I was traumatized. I told myself it was PTSD. I saw a therapist who asked me gentle questions about stress and control, and I lied because how do you say the ocean is stalking me without getting sedated? I almost convinced myself it was fading, until I got the note. Not under a windshield wiper this time. Under my apartment door, slid neatly like a bill. Folded once. No name. Inside, careful, tidy handwriting. Wrong shore. Next time, my hands went numb. My mouth tasted like salt. I spent the rest of that night with every light on, sitting on my couch with a kitchen knife like it was going to help me against the sea. The next day, I quit my job and moved back to the coast because part of me thought if I got closer to the water, maybe it would stop stalking me like a thing searching. Maybe it would be satisfied. That's what people don't understand about fear. Sometimes you run toward it hoping it'll stop chasing. I found a small coastal town, foggy, tired, the kind of place where everything smells like old fish and diesel. I rented a place above a bait shop. I told myself the salt air would calm me. I told myself I'd get used to it. The first week, I almost did. The ocean was loud here. It had waves and gulls and engines and all the normal chaos that makes it feel alive in a familiar way. The knocking of my pipes seemed quieter, lost in the background. Then one night, I was walking home from the dock after buying cigarettes, and my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No text. Just a photo. Grainy. Taken at night. Slightly off angle. The back of my head. Same jacket. Same hunched shoulders. In the reflection of a puddle in front of me, lit by a street lamp, was a smooth white curve parked by the harbor wall. A pod, half submerged, unmarked. My chest tightened so hard I thought I was going to faint. I turned around on the street, scanning, heart hammering. The harbor was empty. Just dark water and creaking ropes. I walked faster, keys between my fingers like that meant anything. The whole time, I felt like the water in the harbor was watching me, the surface too smooth, too patient. When I got in my apartment, I locked the door, checked the windows, and sat on the kitchen floor like I had on the vessel. That's when I heard it, from the pipes behind the wall. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Knock, knock, knock. I sat there shaking, listening, and realized it wasn't coming from inside my building. It was coming from the water below the dock. Like something was knocking on the pilings. Like it was asking to be let in. I didn't sleep. I watched the dark window until dawn and told myself I was done running. I told myself I was going to expose this, tell someone, post it, scream it into the world until it couldn't hide. And then, tonight, it happened again. That's why I'm writing this while I still can. Because tonight, I saw the white pod again. Not in a reflection. Not in a photo. Outside my window. I live above a bait shop, like I said. My window faces the harbor. I can see the water between the pilings, black and slick. I can hear it slapping wood. I can smell it even through closed glass, brine, and rot and diesel. An hour ago, I was trying to distract myself with TV noise when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No text. Just 3 dots like someone typing. Then a single message. Open it yourself. I didn't understand at first. My hands started sweating. My mouth went metallic. Then I heard the hum. A low vibration through the floorboards, through the window glass, through my teeth. I stood up slowly, legs shaking, and went to the window. The harbor was mostly dark except for a few sodium lights and the occasional boat mast light. The water lay flat as oil between the pilings. And there it was, a smooth white shape pressed alongside the dock below my building, half submerged, unmarked. No running lights. No registration. Just white. It sat angled slightly wrong, like it had been left in a hurry. My breath turned shallow. My vision tunneled. I didn't want to look, but I did. Because if I didn't look, it would still be there, and I'd still be prey. The pod's hatch was open a crack, just enough to show darkness inside. Something inside shifted. Not a person, not the outline of a man in a suit. Something lower, broader. A pale glow pulsed once like a heartbeat. Then, from the dock below, I heard footsteps. Not on the street behind my building. On the dock planks. Slow. Vet. I backed away from the window, heart slamming, and that's when the knocking started. Not on my pipes this time. On my door. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Knock, knock, knock. My throat closed. I stood frozen in my tiny apartment, listening to the polite tapping on my cheap wooden door like it was the most insane thing in the world. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A photo. It was taken from inside my own hallway, outside my door, angled slightly down. It showed the bottom edge of my door and my feet visible through the gap, barefoot on the apartment floor. And in the corner of the frame, reflected in the glossy pane of the hallway wall, was a smooth white curve. The pod, heart below, waiting. My stomach turned. I staggered back, nearly tripping over my own chair. The knocking came again, gentle and patient. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't answer. I didn't breathe. Then a new sound joined it, faint at first, then clearer. A drip from my kitchen sink. Steady. 3 drops. Pause. 3 drops. As if the water inside my own pipes was tapping along, agreeing. My door handle turned, slowly like someone testing it. Not rattling, not forcing, testing, like they already knew it would open when it was time. And that hum from outside, the vibration through the building, grew stronger like an engine idling, like pressure building. I can't call the police. I tried months ago with other things, and all that happened was a wellness check and a cop looking at me like I was a drunk fisherman telling ghost stories. I can't call the harbor master because what do I say? There's an unmarked submersible outside and the ocean's knocking on my door. So I'm writing this because it's the only thing I can do that feels like leaving a trail. My door just knocked again. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. And I swear to God, on the other side of it, I can smell deep water, cold brine, and something ancient like a rock cracked open, like a place no human should ever have drilled into. The handle is turning now, slowly, like someone has all the time in the world.